Hello, I'm Brian Waldes, Chief Financial Officer for the City of Loveland. Thank you for tuning in to what we're calling our Budget Basics video. Our goal as a city is to ensure clear and concise information about what we do for our citizens and how we do it. We feel this is a very important goal because the city does provide a lot of services for its citizens, and it's important that we communicate that so citizens understand how their government serves them, as well as how it's funded. Why is this important? This is important because the City of Loveland has been a full-service city for 70 years. What we mean by full-service city is that the city doesn't just provide basic functions like public safety and transportation. We also provide a lot of the services that inform the very fabric of what makes Loveland, Loveland. And as you can see on this slide, as you look at the pictures moving from right to left, you see we do provide those basic services that every government is expected to provide: police, fire, also transportation, plowing the streets, filling potholes. But through our general fund, the city also provides things like the Foot Lagoon concerts, the library, the Parks and Rec. Parks, we have parks all over the city. We have the Chilson Rec Center. We have art in public places. The city provides a lot of services that go beyond those basic government services and really inform the very fabric of what makes Loveland, Loveland. The general fund that provides most of these services exists very much on an island. We follow the rules, obviously, of governmental accounting, and those require that we have separate funds based on different government functions. So, like the functions I just explained, those are contained in the general fund. We have a lot of other funds in the city because we provide a lot of other services as well. We provide clean drinking water, right? We provide electricity, we have pulse, we have stormwater management, sewer, you name it. We have a lot of different functions throughout the city, and they're organized into different funds. It's important to realize that those utility funds, like the water fund, the electric fund, the power fund, I should say, are separate from the general fund. So when you're paying, for example, your water bill, you are paying into the water utility fund that has no connection really with the general fund. So if we're having a problem in the general fund with sales tax, we can't raise water rates. And it goes the other way as well. If you're having a problem in the water fund, you can't raise sales tax to help the water fund. All these functions exist in their own silos and operate very much like businesses. And that's a logical way to have things set up because it keeps our business type functions separate from our governmental type functions. And those governmental functions, like we've talked about a little bit at the beginning, exist in the general fund. So we also have special revenue funds. Those do not exist on fees like enterprise funds do. Those are special taxes. So for example, we have our marketing fund. That marketing fund is funded by our lodging tax. The lodging tax goes into the special revenue fund and can only be used for the purposes of marketing the city. So you have very much that same situation there where if we're having a problem in the general fund, we can't go increase lodging tax and vice versa. So it's important for people to understand that we have a lot of different functions, but they are separate from each other. The government isn't just one big pot of money sloshing around. Instead, it's organized into a number of different funds by service. So as we see on this slide, we have a list of all those different services and which funds they're in. You see in the general fund, a ton of different services, right? Everything from your public safety. You see we have police in there. We have our friends at the LFRA, Loveland Fire Rescue Authority, helping us with fire safety, all the way to the swim beach. The general fund provides a very wide array of services. Enterprise funds, as you see on the right, those are organized more by function, and you can see everything from your stormwater and wastewater to a golf fund. It's important to note that our golf course is not taxpayer subsidized. Okay, that's an enterprise fund and operates solely on fees, pretty much like any golf course would. So that's an important distinction, and that's why that's an enterprise fund. It does not crosstalk with the general fund, which is funded primarily by taxes. So what we're going to look at now is how that organization, how those separate funds inform what our fund balances are. What fund balance means is really what money do you have in the checking account for each particular fund. So you see on this slide, we have about $151 million in net fund balance citywide. So that's a great number. It's a very healthy fund balance for us to have. But as you can see on the pie chart, the majority of those funds belong to the enterprise funds. So $134 million of that fund balance belongs to our power fund, our water fund, and well, it should, because those funds have very expensive projects, right? If somebody backs into a transformer, the power fund could be out over $1 million the next day. So you have to have those fund balances there for projects, both planned and unplanned, and that protects the community from service interruptions if one of those funds has an issue. So that's the good news, is that the city, for the most part, is in great shape in terms of our fund balances. However, when we look at the general fund balance, you can see that green pie slice there. That's still a relatively healthy fund balance at roughly $17.6 million. However, the issue is, if you look at that fund balance, the vast majority of it, $17.2 million, is in what we call our contingency reserve. The contingency reserve represents about 2 months of expenditures in the general fund, and it is a very standard practice for governments to keep that kind of, that quantity of funding aside, about 2 to 3 months worth of expenses in your general fund, reserved in case of emergencies. The last time we accessed these funds was for the flood. So, when you do have an emergency like that, the federal government and FEMA are going to come and help you, but it's very important for communities to be able to get help to its citizens the next day. And that's what the City of Loveland was able to do because we have this practice in place. And the good news is we still have that contingency fund balance fully funded, although, as you can see by that other category, general fund unassigned fund balance, we have a very slim margin above that reserve, about $357,000. Now, $357,000 is a lot of money as well, but when you consider the general fund, on average, is about $130 million in and out every year, and it's very much in a break-even proposition right now. Our revenues are very close to our expenditures. However, more on that in a minute. That's not a very good unassigned fund balance. We really would like that fund balance to be closer to the 17 million number, actually, so we can have 2 pots of money in our general fund for, just like the enterprise funds have, projects planned and unplanned. If we have something come up during the year, it's helpful for our council to be able to consider doing additional measures that weren't contemplated at the beginning of the year, but you have to have fund balance to do those things. So while the general fund emergency reserve, contingency reserve, is still very well funded, we have an issue with the unassigned fund balance. We're very much in this kind of break-even position. So we've talked about there your balance sheet or your bank account. What we're going to look at now is more of your income statement or where the money comes from. Like we referenced a couple times in this presentation, your general fund is very much funded by taxes. That is the primary source of revenue for the general fund. It does collect fees. For example, at your rec center at the Chilson, you do pay a fee to use that facility. But those fees do not represent the true cost of the service. Those are tax subsidized services at our rec center. So when you do go there, you are paying for a percentage of the cost of the service you're being provided, but sales tax comes in and subsidizes that service, and that's what we like to offer the community, right? Tax subsidized, lower cost options for recreation and other opportunities throughout the city as well. But primarily, your revenue source for the general fund is taxes and primarily sales tax. Just to illustrate the difference between the different funding levels, sales tax for 2024 was initially budgeted at $65 million for the general fund. But because of the impacts of ballot question 300, we've lowered that from $65 million to $52 million for 2024. Now, $52 million is your sales tax budget. Your next highest tax revenue, or your next highest revenue period, in the general fund is property tax at about $16 million. So that's a big drop off from 52 to 16. So your general fund lives and dies by sales tax. Those other revenue sources do add up, they are significant, but it is sales tax that really drives the ship for the general fund. So on this slide here, what we're seeing is what our sales tax rate is at 3%, which was set in 1984. It has not been increased since then. And then if you look over to the right on the map there, those circles are to scale. And what you'll see is Loveland has the lowest sales tax rate in the region. And what we mean by region is kind of northern Colorado, our northern I-25 corridor here. And looking at our sister cities, you can see that Loveland at 3% with no tax on food for home consumption as a result of our election in November 2023 is tied with Wellington for functionally the lowest sales tax base in our neighborhood. You can see that, for example, Fort Collins has a bifurcated sales tax rate. You pay a lower sales tax amount for food for home consumption, but you pay a higher sales tax rate outside the supermarket. So Fort Collins does have that bifurcated sales tax rate, but as far as your larger cities, Loveland is the only one that does not tax food for home consumption. And it's also important to note that Loveland did not have a separate tax on food for home consumption. Rather, food for home consumption was included in our sales tax base and was taxed at that 3% rate, just like it is in every other city up and down the Front Range here, again, with the exception of Wellington. Next, we're going to take a quick look at property tax. Our property tax mill rate of 9.564 mils was set in 1992. That has not been increased since then. And if you look at the map on the right, same map, kind of same concept there, circles are to scale, you'll see that at that 9.5 mill rate, we have Berthoud and Timnath lower than us, but after that, we're kind of tied with our friends in Fort Collins, but after that, everyone is north of us in terms of mill levy rate. Another thing that's important to note is that City of Loveland is only a 12.4% portion of your average property tax bill here in Loveland. As you see on this slide, your school district is your big mill levy entity, which is very common, right? Your school district is usually that top property tax collector. Then comes the county, also very normal. That's how almost every county in Colorado is set up. And then third comes the municipality, comes Loveland at 12.4% of the bill. So when we hear about the reassessment increase, right? We've all seen our property tax bills go up recently. That was a function of the county, not the city. The county performing its reassessment task every 2 years. And when you see that kind of reassessment, it does increase your property tax bill, but the City of Loveland actually doesn't get much of that. We only get 12% of it. So sometimes that can confuse our perception of how the city's revenues are doing when we look at our own property tax bill and say, hey, my bill's gone up a ton. City of Loveland must be swimming in it. The reality is most of that property tax goes to the school district and the county. Again, as it should, but I just want to make sure we have a clear perception of the fact that Loveland is a relatively small portion of your property tax bill. So when we combine these two factors, when we combine what our sales tax rate is and where we fit in with our neighbor communities with that sales tax rate, and then we combine that with our property tax rate, and we see where that fits in with our neighbors around the community, and we create this exercise that we see on the slide here, kind of a hypothetical citizen, right, with a $425,000 assessed value house, $13,000 of walk-around spending at retail, and then $4,600 spent in the grocery store. We model that out to see what the tax impact or what the taxes owed would be for this person. And as you can see, we're ranked in order there. The green squares indicate the lowest rates or amounts, and the red squares indicate the higher rates. You can see Loveland comes out at the very bottom of the list, below our friends in Wellington and Timnath, and very far below Fort Collins, Longmont, Greeley, more of those cities that have the same full-service model that we do. The issue here is we used to be, before we excluded food for home consumption, we were actually up there between Wellington and Berthoud. So we still weren't anywhere near the top of the list before that change was made. But after that change was made and we removed food for home consumption and it had that $13 million impact on our general fund revenue, on our sales tax revenue, we are now at the bottom, and at the bottom by quite a bit. And that is a challenging place for a full-service city to be, because as you've seen, we have not raised sales tax or property tax in a generation. We are a full-service city. You've seen all the services we provide, and we've been doing it for what I'll call a rock bottom price, right? Those are some of the lowest rates you would have found in the Front Range. Now it's the absolute lowest, but we were already getting a good deal here in the City of Loveland for our tax dollar in terms of the amount of services we were receiving and the taxes we were paying. But our concern now at the city is that with this change, our revenue model has really plummeted to the bottom of this list, and it also does no longer match up with our expenses in the general fund in terms of our ability to provide all of those services. Now, like I said at the beginning, we're very much a break-even proposition in the general fund. So how much is our annual deficit or our annual revenue shortfall? It's about $13 million, really the impact of the change to our sales tax base. So where does your tax dollar go when we do collect it? Well, here we have kind of that dollar bill pie chart graphic, which shows where your dollar goes in the general fund. About 39% of it, or 39 cents on the dollar, goes to public safety. and that includes our friends at the LPD, Loveland Police Department, and LFRA, our Loveland Fire and Rescue Authority. And that also includes some of our transportation efforts, streets. Then if you go to the right, you'll see our internal operations and support. If you kind of combine that one with the executive departments at 3 cents, 20 cents for the internal operations and support, that comes out to 23% for what we call our administrative load, right? What it costs to run the organization, to do all the compliance work, all the risk control, insurance, and things like that. So at 23%, about 20 to 25% is the benchmark for a municipality. So we're pretty happy to be right there in that zone. Then you see transportation, or your COLT, there is 15 cents or 15%. Important to note that a lot of that 15% that you see there, that 15 cents on the dollar, is matched by federal grants. So we really leverage that money and get a lot of impact for our spend on our COLT system. Then you see in the bottom right corner our community partnership and support services, which reach out to our agencies who help a lot of our friends and neighbors here in the City of Loveland. Then you have your economic development and planning at 5 cents. That is the group that helps bring in great employers and great projects to the city. And then that last square in that bottom middle is your parks, recreation, library, cultural services at 16%. And those are those slides, those are those pictures from that first slide where we talked about all the services we provide. Those are, what we consider the community personality, the very fiber of what Loveland is, the things people love about Loveland. We all love our police officers and our firefighters, right? And the men and women who keep our streets passable. But the things that we really love to do that the city provides are really contained in that 16% square. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about TABOR. TABOR is a voter-approved amendment to our Colorado State Constitution. It was approved in 1992 after a couple of attempts that had failed. And TABOR has a lot of different requirements. It can be kind of confusing, but a lot of cities and counties separate themselves for TABOR for a variety of reasons, and we'll talk about those in a second. But the main requirements of TABOR that you can't get away from in the state of Colorado are that any increase to tax rates need to be voter approved. So that's why in Colorado, you hear about your tax elections if there's any kind of increase to property tax or sales tax, and no government in Colorado can increase tax rates without an election. So that's because of TABOR. Something else TABOR has is what we kind of call the revenue formula or revenue limitation. And TABOR mandates that if you are not separated from TABOR, your revenue, total revenue for your funds, can only grow in proportion with a formula that's based on your inflation rate and your population growth. So, for example, if you were to have a big store come into the middle of your city and they start generating a ton of sales tax, that'd be great, but you might not be able to keep it all if you didn't have a big percentage of population growth or inflation. So TABOR can be a little arbitrary in that sense that the formula stays fixed regardless of changes in economic activity you might have in your community. And that is the portion of TABOR that we in Loveland have been separated from for about 20 years. And the reason we want to separate from that is because if you do have these overage situations, then you might be responsible to issue refunds to taxpayers. I do air quotes because TABOR is infamously silent as to what a taxpayer is and what a refund is. So, for example, in the case of 2024, we had a TABOR overage, and it calculated out to about $14 per person in the City of Loveland. Now, of course, we just went by our overall population, about 80,000 people. However, the issue is, how do we get the $14 to each person? We've heard cases where a refund, again with quotes, since it's not defined in TABOR, could be a free day at a rec center. So if a city were to owe everybody $10 and that's what a day at the rec center costs, every citizen could get a free day at the rec center. So TABOR is a little bit confusing and vague when it comes to refunds and even when it comes to who the taxpayers are. We have visitors to our city that pay sales tax, right? Do we need to track them down? Generally, people say no, but again, TABOR is not specific about it. So TABOR, or I should say City of Loveland, has been separated from TABOR for a long period of time, about 20 years. If we look on this slide, you can see that a lot of entities in Colorado have also separated from TABOR. That map shows the counties that have overridden or separated from that requirement at TABOR. You can't separate from the election requirement, but you can separate from that revenue formula. So you can see the majority of counties have separated from TABOR. If you look at those elections, the election statistics, I should say, the results of the elections in that pie chart there, 87% of the time those elections pass. In other words, the citizens elect to separate from TABOR, but you do have that 13% fail rate as well. This map shows the result of TABOR elections, again, in that same kind of our little corner of the state. You can see that some cities, for example, Fort Collins, you see they only had the one election in 1994. That's because that was permanent. They had their one TABOR election, said we want to separate from this forever, and that's what they did in 1994. Loveland has a sunset, right? We love a sunset here in Loveland, and I think that's a great practice. So we've had our TABOR elections every so often here in Loveland. We did have a failure of the ballot question in 2023. It did not fail by a lot. It only failed by 932 votes, and I'm going to approach our council and ask them if they want us to put that question back on the ballot in November of 2024. The reason we want to do that is because we feel that this convention we've been using of being separated from TABOR has done a ton of good for the city. And I'll go into where those funds have been used here in just a second. But again, when you weigh the benefits of trying to refund, like in our last example, about $14 to every person, versus using the money for, like we see on this slide, public safety, parks and open space, and the vast majority of it goes to transportation, we feel like that has a much higher value to the community than trying to refund, in that last example, $14 to each person. It might end up costing me more than $14 per person to get the money to you. So that is why being separated from TABOR can be a good thing for a community, especially when we take a look at this slide in detail and see that over about the last 20 years, we've had $51 million in TABOR funds that we retained that were reinvested right back into the community, right back into our infrastructure. Okay, so it goes for capital expenditures for public safety, for LPD, for open parks and open space, but primarily the vast majority of it has gone to public works and transportation, in particular street rehab. So we take that money, we take that overage, and as you can see on this slide, primarily fill potholes with it. Keep the streets as good as we can here in Colorado. As you all know, that's difficult with all the snow and the plows. You're always refilling potholes. So $36 million of that $51 million went into just road resurfacing and maintaining our streets. $7 million went to our parks. And then if you look to the right there, you'll see $3 million went to LPD. So that's what we use the TABOR funds for. So that, if it is the will of council, we will put that question back on the ballot in November of 2024. So that concludes the math portion of the presentation. What we just want to talk about very briefly now is all our efforts to communicate with you about what is in your city budget. We feel this is extremely important because maybe it's an effort we haven't been doing as well as we should have been doing in the past, but that is changing now. We feel like we want to communicate not just this year, but every year with the community about what you get for your tax dollar from the City of Loveland. I'd like to take this opportunity very quickly just to say I've been here a relatively short period of time. I've been here a little over 2 years. I have been so impressed by the job that people do that work for this city, how much pride they take in it, and how much they love this community. They have been providing this full service portfolio of services for a generation at the lowest price up and down the Front Range. And from what I've seen of Loveland, I feel that very much reflects the personality of Lovelanders, right? We have all the great things that all our neighbors have, but we do it efficiently. We do it for the lowest price up and down the Front Range. And I'm very proud to be part of that effort. And I think it's very important that we inform the community of the good deal they're getting from the City of Loveland, because that's an important part of our job. It's to not only do our jobs, but to communicate to you what we are doing. So in that vein, we are doing things like this video. We are going to boards. We have lots of boards and commissions here, citizen advisory boards at the City of Loveland. So we've been going to all of those different boards, if they'll have us, to talk about this presentation. Really to give them the same presentation, talk about our budget. We're going to do informational booths at local special events. Pretty sure we're going to be at the farmers market. I'm very excited for that. I also want to make a corn shucking team, but we'll see. Presentations to community groups and organizations. You out there, if you're listening, if you think that there'd be a group you're with, a PTA group, hockey team, soccer team, you name it, we'll come give a talk at your group. So if you have a meeting, we don't care if it's 5 people or 50 people, we would love to get out into the community and talk to you about what we do at the City of Loveland. And we'll also go to meetings or charrettes. I still do not know what a charrette is. Website improvements. We also have access, and there'll be a QR code at the end of this presentation, and I'm sure there's links somewhere on this site for you to come to our website and see our new and improved website that talks about our current budget, our budget process, about our capital plan, about other improvements we're trying to make to the process. We also have other platforms on our website. We have Budget Watch, which is an effort that we're going to continue to try to inform people of the development of the 2025 budget. Because as we've talked about, we're in a very precarious situation right now in the general fund. We're okay, but we have to make a plan about what we're going to do about that $13 million shortfall. Because we're going to have to do something, because we are spending more than we are taking in, and we don't have a big cushion, right? We remember that from the first slide. So please pay attention to Budget Watch, pay attention to council meetings, so you'll understand, what the impacts of that ballot measure are going to be and how we're going to address them. Because we can't stay in this current model. We're going to have to make a change. We're going to have to lower expenses to meet that shortfall. Because again, we don't have the money in the bank to cover it for any period of time. So please check out Budget Watch. Here's your QR code. Hit that. It'll take you right to our pages, or you can just click on the link, and that will take you to our budget pages. And please take a look at what we do. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to give us an email, and we really appreciate the time you took to watch the video. Thank you so much.